23 ConnectED. I remind everyone, please remain muted if you are not speaking. And we are going to get started momentarily. Our first session today is going to be with keynote speaker, Dr. Cynthia Passmore, and she's going to present on modeling with purpose. We will have a chance to be in breakout rooms, and so we'll have a little bit of moving around to do at that point. But right now, I'm going to turn it over to Cindy, and so I will stop sharing. And Cindy, if you would like to share your slides, there you go.
Yeah, I'm all good. Okay, everybody see the right thing? Let's hope.
Modeling with a purpose. Looks good.
All right. Well, thanks for being here, everybody. I'm Cynthia Passmore, and I'm going to get going. I can't see the chat when
I can run chat for you.
Sharing like that, so just saying. Okay, so our time tonight, we're going to start with introductions. We're going to have a quick breakout room so you can talk with one another, because that's the most powerful thing, when teachers talk to each other. We're going to talk about sort of modeling more generally, because I'm not a member of your community, and just sort of want to get on the same page, I guess. I'm going to provide you with a little bit of a framework that I use. I'm going to have another breakout room, and then we'll talk about implications and some results from recent research that I've been doing, and then one final breakout and closing. That's a lot, so we'll see if we get through all of it. So first, I just want to start by introducing myself. I'm Cynthia Passmore. I'm a faculty member at the University of California, Davis. I was a former high school teacher. I am now a teacher educator and a researcher and a curriculum designer. And these are some of the things that I've worked on. I think the thing that got me the invitation to do this was the Helping Students Make Sense of the World and the modeling chapter in that. But my colleagues, Christina Schwartz and Brian Reiser, and I had the honor of editing that Helping Students book that brought together lots of really amazing science education scholars to think about all the practices for NGSS, and was offered by NSTA. So that's sort of my background and what I'm up to here. I've been working on modeling since I was a graduate student at the University of Wisconsin. I've known about this organization for a long time, and I've known many, many teachers who have participated in it, but I don't know why, really. I have never really been part of your community. So just know that I'm a fan from the side, and appreciate the work that your group does. So we're going to do two things here for breakout rooms. We're going to, this is kind of both training how we're going to use some Google Slides to manage our breakout rooms, but also a chance for you to get to know one another. So we're going to post this link in the chat. Can you do that, or can I?
You can.
If you go to this place, don't join your breakout room yet. I can see people popping into that slide deck. Basically, go to the room that is your room, your breakout room. So if you're invited to room 2, then that's what those are the slides you go to. So it's just repeated. I'm sure you've seen Zoom used this way, so I'm probably just telling you things you already know how to do. And then we're going to just follow the instructions on the first slide, which is the introduction slide. So find your breakout room, find your breakout room slides, and then follow the instructions on those slides to we're going to try 5 minutes, 5-minute conversation.
Now, if I'm recording, I think I'm only recording whatever breakout room I'm in.
We don't usually record the breakout rooms.
That's what I mean.
So
I will pause during breakouts.
Yeah. So we have about 4. There's either
Mid-sentence, you were torn out of your rooms. You can always tell when people are done with breakout rooms, because when they close, everyone comes back, but you all didn't come back till it forced you. So hopefully you're having some good chats with your colleagues. If you got to this and were the designated person to put something in our whole group chat about what comes to mind when you think about a successful modeling lesson, I invite you to put that in now. Yeah, lots of things about aha moments and satisfying work and student-to-student discourse. Yeah, love it. Okay, well, hopefully you had a good conversation and you have now met your breakout room folks that will be with you for the rest of the evening, we hope. We think we have the speed of the breakout rooms thing will be a little bit faster next time. So we're going to do two more in just a little bit. But in the meantime, I'm going to talk a little bit more about all of our favorite topic. Okay, so I want to set the stage here with what I think is probably some shared ideas and some thinking. Again, I'm not part of your community, so I don't know some of the language and ways in which you talk about these things. I assume that we, well, I know from what I've read and talked to people that we have a lot of shared commitments. But one of the things that we've found in our work to be a useful contrast is this idea of knowing about something, or what we sometimes call with the teachers with whom we work, an information frame. I'm going to pause for a second and say, I say we, because I don't do any of this work alone ever. I work with many teachers and other teacher educators and professional developers. So I'm going to use the plural this whole time because I feel strongly that this isn't just me, but it's the work of my whole team, the whole team with whom I have the honor to work at UC Davis. So when we talk with teachers, we talk about this knowing about or information frame, and the sort of underlying idea in that frame is that kids are empty buckets ready to be filled with knowledge from the teacher. So that's kind of what traditional schooling has us believe, right? And that is in contrast to the way I think we think about it in modeling classes, which is really a figuring out frame. So this contrast from knowing about to figuring out the science ideas. And then we also sometimes call that a sense-making frame. And in that case, we have young people building something together as a community. And so this contrast between knowing about and figuring out, or the information frame and the sense-making frame, for me is a useful way to sort of talk about. And of course, I want to acknowledge that it's all a continuum, right? It's not like, on any given day, a teacher can be going in and out of these frames in their classroom. And it's also not to say that knowing about stuff or having information or learning information is a bad thing. So that's right. We have to know information in order to do stuff. But if that's the only name of the game, then that's where I think we get into some trouble. So I'm also going to start with some general ideas about models and modeling, because again, I'm not part of your community, and I think that I just want to be clear about where we are. And this is a quote. Years ago, my a graduate student and I spent a lot of time in the philosophy of science literature, which was very cool and interesting. And I came across this quote that came originally from a paper in 1976. So you know how long people have been at this. And more recently from a paper in 2009 about the way in which we as a community of scientists and science educators use this word model quite promiscuously. In other words, lots of different things we label with that term. So when I'm talking about a model, I'm talking about a conceptual idea about how something in the world works. And usually it's a mechanistic model. It can be a descriptive model. And I think that lots of pieces of that really depend on where you are in both your conceptual sophistication in a particular content area and maybe also developmentally. So, when I'm in teacher education, so when I see brand new teachers, usually if I ask them what comes to mind when they hear the word model, these are the kinds of things that they tell me are models in science. And for a long time in my early career, I would say, no, that's wrong. I wouldn't say that, but I would think that's just wrong. These things are not the models. But then what that does is like put people on the defensive and say, wait, that's a model. It's a model of whatever. And so in our exploration of trying to understand how models actually operate in science and how they might operate in science education, we've done a lot of work thinking about, maybe the question isn't, is this a model? But the question is, to what purpose are we putting this thing? And so my colleague, Julia Govea, who's at Tufts now, and I came up with this sort of scheme to represent this idea. So there are these things that we call models. They are usually externally represented as a depiction of some system. And we often think of them as representations of the phenomena in the world that we're trying to understand or make sense of. And the problem with this is it's sort of like very flat and 2D, and it doesn't take into account the person who's doing the reasoning about this system. And so in the philosophy of science, that person is called a cognitive agent. And their intention matters in terms of how a model is developed, deployed, revised. And so if we can shift to bringing the cognitive agent into the picture, then we sort of have a different scheme for thinking about what work, intellectual work, models might do in our classrooms. So in this scheme, we have models being used by some human, a cognitive agent, for the purpose of making sense of some phenomenon. And yes, we represent those things, usually in, maybe in a diagram, maybe in an equation, maybe in a three-dimensional object. But the purpose is defined by the person doing the modeling. And so it really matters how we have framed the task for students. It matters how a scientist frames their task, and it matters how a student frames their task. So this is a shift. It's talked about in this paper, and we have come to talk about this as in a short way as the of for distinction. In other words, is it a model of something or is it a model for something? And I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit. And of course, for us in the classroom, that cognitive agent is the student. So I think that this also sort of implies a shift in instructional paradigm. So in this depiction, where we're thinking about models of something, of some target knowledge, the students are passive recipients of the model. And it's either in their heads or they can draw it or recreate it, but they may not be able to use it as a reasoning tool. And so when we really think about bringing the cognitive agent into the scheme and the purpose that the modeling is being done to forward, that really shifts us into more of a constructivist paradigm where students are active and they're using models to construct explanations for the phenomena that make sense to them and help them make sense of the world. So this is this heuristic that I thought I would introduce tonight, and maybe some of you have heard it before, but the difference between a model of something and a model for something, I think is very usefully like an easy one to think about is DNA. So we often talk about the model of DNA, and usually, or at least traditionally in science classrooms, the model of DNA is like, you know these facts. It's a double helix, A pairs with T, C pairs with G, something about phosphate, backbone, sugar phosphate, backbone, whatever, right? Like just a bunch of little facts about this thing, and often accompanied by a picture of Watson and Crick pointing to their tin model that they made. And so I'm going to get to that in a second. So when we actually think about what Watson and Crick were up to, they were not up to depicting what the DNA molecule looked like, although the three-dimensional structure of that molecule was critically important to their work. The way it looked was not what they cared about. They cared about how traits are passed from one generation to the next and how a molecule can encode information. So an example that we often use in our work is a letter that Crick wrote to his son. When he, the day before or the week before their paper was about to come out. And so he says, he's saying, like, we've made a really important discovery. We've built a model for the structure of, he's like, read it carefully. His son was in high school at the time. And he says, it's like a code. If you were given one set of letters, you can write the others down. And now we believe that DNA is a code. That is that the order of the letters helps us understand how one gene is different from the other. And in other words, we found the basic copying mechanism by which life comes from life. So if you read these words by him, it's clear he's not just depicting some object, right, that has these features. He's figuring something out fundamental about how life works and about heredity, about how heredity works. And so his model is for understanding the transmission of genetic material from one generation to the next. So that's what we mean when we talk about the of-for distinction. And then further, to come back to this idea that I was talking about a moment ago, when we're in this kind of models of frame, if I'm just wanting kids to know the base pair rules of DNA or whatever, I'm in this very kind of I want them to know about something and I want them to have information, versus if I'm in a models for frame, I'm really thinking about asking the kids to do the figuring out, giving them the opportunity to put those pieces together for a sense-making purpose that they have. So if we come back to this question of, are these models? Now, how might we answer that question, given what we've just talked about here? So I'm going to send you to breakout rooms again to kind of make sense of this of-for distinction if it's new to you, to give you a few minutes to think about that. So you're going to go to the models for slide, which is the second slide in that breakout room system. So again, I want to emphasize that, like, it's not for me to say whether those things that are on the slide are or are not models, but rather the question we're asking is, how are they being used? And are they being used for making sense of a phenomenon? If there's no phenomenon there, just knowing the layers of the earth, it's not a model. It's not acting like a model. If there's not a phenomenon there, understanding, being able to draw where the water goes, but not connecting that to the words like evaporation and condensation to actual things that I see in the world. If I'm a fifth grader drawing the water cycle, it's not behaving as a model for me, right? So it's when those things are animated with purpose that they really serve what cognitive scientists, philosophers of science, and science educators would call a model, or that we are engaged in modeling, or the modeling practice. So I see that a lot of you kind of had similar ideas and things that you wrote down. So let's take just a second to see. I love this, that the model of is like an end product versus a model for that's like generative, right? It leads us to somewhere else. Yeah, and the role of questions is another really important piece that seems to be coming up in your conversations. So hopefully this little scheme that we're using with the Google Slides is working for you to frame these breakouts and help you have some productive conversation, because just like your students, I don't believe we as teachers make sense of anything by just sitting and listening to someone tell us about it. So as we work together tonight, the idea is that you have an opportunity to talk with one another. So I appreciate your doing that. Okay, I'm going to go back to my slides. Maybe. Okay, so what are the implications of having this view of models? If we think about always wanting the model to be fulfilling a purpose that's related to sense making about phenomena in the world, what kind of cascades from there? So I'm going to tell you about a couple things that I've been thinking about with regard to this, and also share with you the results of a study that we did in classrooms, and sort of what the consequences of having a modeling perspective were in those classrooms. So one of the implications of having this view is that a model is not just a thing by itself. It is animated by the phenomenon we are trying to explain and the particular questions we ask about those phenomena. So in our work at UC Davis, we've been working on a curriculum that's model-based for high school biology, and this is the framework that we use for curriculum design. So in any given lesson, we have decided to, instead of chunk our units up by time segments, like 50-minute class periods or something like that, we have chunked them up by where on this triangle we are, and we call that a learning segment. So a learning segment could be we're exploring a phenomenon. A learning segment could be we're asking questions about that phenomenon. So it's what we call a P to Q learning segment. It could be that we're modeling. It could be that we're going back and realizing that our model can be applied to other phenomena besides the first one that we talked about. So we can kind of be anywhere on this triangle in any given lesson, or what we call learning segment. So we have found that really helpful to keep our classroom-based activities really anchored and tied to a model that is serving the intellectual purpose of explaining or helping us explain a phenomenon. So we call this PQM, phenomena question model. So I'll talk to you about that in a little bit. 2, in particular, having that framework has really helped us think about how to select and bound phenomena to use in the classroom. So one of the challenges when we're modeling is to figure out what are the boundaries of the model that we're trying to develop. And the phenomenon is important for that, but so are the questions. So for example, we could look at this beautiful sunset, and we could ask a lot of different scientific questions about that would invoke or imply different models. So for example, we could wonder, obviously the sunset would be on some horizon. We could wonder why that sunset is there on that spot on the horizon tonight when I noticed 3 weeks ago it was someplace else on the horizon. So that would be a question I could ask about the sunset that would then invoke a particular model that's about, how the spatial relationships between the Earth and the sun. I could ask a totally different question that would imply a totally different model or set of models, like, why does the sunset look like this? Why is the sun orange tonight? And 3 weeks ago, it wasn't orange, or another night it was more pink or something like that. And now all of a sudden I'm in a set of models that are about colors and wavelengths and atmospheric conditions and all kinds of things like that. So the phenomenon doesn't necessarily tell us what model we're going to be using, but the way we talk about or question the phenomenon can help us narrow in on the kinds of models that we want to be working on today. So from a curriculum development perspective, or from a teacher design perspective, knowing in advance the relationship between the phenomenon you're going to put in front of kids, the questions you're going to, hope that we can generate as a result of that, and then the kinds of models that we want to try. So the sort of problem with is like, we're not going to have a model of the sunset, but we might say that we want a model of Earth, Moon, Sun, three-dimensional relationships. But that doesn't tell me anything about what I can explain with that model. So the problem with is that usually it's naming the science idea and not the phenomenon. And so the promise, I think, of using the models is that we're linking the model with the phenomena that we want to be explaining. So that's one example of an implication of this view. The other ones I'm going to talk to you about right now are going to be in the context of this research project that we just finished up. And so I mentioned that we've done this high school biology curriculum. We were fortunate enough, and in fact, I'm in DC right now for a investigators meeting with the National Science Foundation, who was our funder, to compare our modeling curriculum with what we called business as usual. So it wasn't a specific curriculum that other teachers that the comparison teachers were using. It was whatever they were regularly using. And then we had teachers in the treatment condition that were using our high school biology curriculum. So we were trying to understand, does curriculum matter for student learning in particular? Although I'm going to talk to you about teacher behavior in a second. And in particular, we're really interested, does curriculum that uses modeling matter? And the main research question was, what was the impact of the model-based educational research, that's the name of our program, on high school student science achievement, and what factors influence that impact? So the exciting news, hot off the presses, is that we did see a significant difference pre-post content, very difficult content exams with the students who were in the study cohort. So that's exciting. But what I want to talk with you right now is more about how the curriculum mattered for the teachers. So in our project, we were able to do a bunch of classroom observations. So we did 41 classroom observations of teachers. 26 of them were treatment teachers. So they were using our curriculum, and 15 of them were comparison teachers. We had huge attrition in the comparison condition. It was the year after COVID, and we didn't have any relationship with those comparison teachers. So they just left the study in droves, unfortunately. So we had pretty uneven groups. So you'll see that in a second. So, we looked at the impact of the use of the curriculum on a couple of things that I think most of us could agree are just like good teaching practice. So I'm going to go through those really quickly, and you'll see the difference between the folks using Ember, the modeling curriculum, and the folks using their just regular instructional materials that did not have any modeling. So one thing is this thing we're talking about tonight, which is lesson purpose. So it was astonishing to me how many classes just dove right in and didn't situate or frame the lesson at all. And again, I know that's because we're busy, and we're also like, as teachers, we're like in our heads, we know what the deal is, but taking the time to frame the lesson as part of a broader purpose of sense making was something that we examined in our observation protocol. And you can see that the treatment teachers were much more likely to be establishing that purpose at the beginning of the class. And when we dive into the field notes from those observations, we find it's because they're tying whatever they're doing that day back to a phenomenon that they're trying to explain. And they're sort of like, okay, so today we're going to like either use the model or work on some more model ideas, or, whatever it is. And they're situating the lesson that way. So the problem with the models of sort of conception is it's very granular and modular, right? So today we're going to learn the base pairing rules of DNA. So that's not really a purpose, right? That's like a thing that we're doing. Or today we're going to do a strawberry DNA extraction. Again, that's not really a lesson purpose. If instead you say, today we're going to wonder about this amazing molecule that comes out as globby stuff when we do this lab with strawberries, and we're going to wonder how it, what kind of structure that is and what importance it plays or whatever. And now we're going to have a purpose around DNA that might be motivated by that lab. That's a terrible example because that lab's hard to, what you see in the lab is not really a phenomenon that's explained by anything you know about DNA. But anyway, other than there's a lot of it. Okay, so establishing lesson purpose is a consequence of having this models for or purposeful modeling orientation. The second thing that we saw as a consequence of having this modeling orientation is cross-lesson coherence. That's very much related to within lesson purpose, right? But it's also saying, remember what we talked about 2 weeks ago when we did blah, 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 and then we did this, and now here's our model as it stands now. Here, today we're working on maybe revising some of those ideas or using those to explain a new phenomenon or something like that. So it's like the kids and the teacher are part of a broader enterprise that's going on over days. And that's kind of easy to reference when you have a very clear purpose that your model is serving. And so again, we saw as a consequence of using the curriculum, we saw teachers doing that kind of talk in their class a lot more. So I just want to be clear that this observation protocol wasn't biased against non-modeling teachers. We were talking about cross-lesson coherence, not anything to do with models. So I'm just showing you some things that seem to be consequences of having, we don't know for sure. So the next one is one that I think is probably near and dear to your heart, which is discourse and the role of student ideas in the classroom. So in our observation, we wondered, or we monitored and documented whether teachers elicited student ideas and whether they attended to student ideas. Like, did they do anything with those ideas once they popped into the space? And again, the high scores for the treatment teachers is mostly because a lot of comparison teachers elicited. They made opportunities for students to say things out loud. But the difference was there wasn't any action for that because most of those teachers were in this kind of information frame, right? So what is the name of the artery that feeds the heart, that goes into the heart? or something like that, and a kid pops up. That's sort of eliciting a student idea, but it's not an idea that's for anything. Versus in the modeling classrooms, the teachers both elicited and attended. So they got a higher score in this category. And again, it's because the ideas had a purpose. The purpose was to develop the model, to use the model, to wonder about something, to question, to explain all of the things that we know modeling does for us. The next one was just the quality of the reasoning tasks in the room. So in the modeling classrooms, the reasoning tasks were much more high quality, and it was the students doing the reasoning. So this part of our observation rubric had sort of two parts. One was, were there anything that we would call reasoning tasks, so something beyond rote definitional work, like I just said about the heart. And so, a fair number of comparison teachers had some reasoning tasks in their lessons, but the next question was, who was doing the reasoning? Was it the teacher or the student? So one thing we saw a lot in, in all classrooms, but more frequently in the comparison classrooms, was this thing we called public reasoning, right? Like, so I'm the teacher, I'm going to take you through, sort of some complex reasoning about this science idea, but I'm going to do it for you. Or I'm going to so heavily scaffold it that the student's not really doing the reasoning, that it's more what I'm up to. So again, the problem with of is it reduces things to little facts and details. The promise of for is that the sort of complexity of the task and the reasoning that we're asking kids to do goes up. Okay, so I had one more, but I'm going to skip it for time. So again, I just blabbed at you for 10 minutes, and I want you to kind of think through, what are the consequences or the implications for having a purpose for the model that's tied to a phenomenon and a question? What are the implications for you and your practice? And how might you talk with your colleagues right now to kind of consider that and think through what we've just talked about? So we will have some Q&A time right after this. And then I'm going to put that link. It's the same slide deck. There's just a third slide in if you go to your same breakout room number, the third slide has another task for you to do, to just kind of mull over all of this that I just said. So again, it's not so much, I'm not trying to brag with the study results. I'm just trying to say there are proven implications. So I want you to think about that for yourself. All right. Do you want to do a mute all?
I don't need to.
Excellent. Yeah, so if you want to share anything in the chat that you that was like key to your conversation, go ahead and do that. And then we're going to wrap up really quickly. Okay, so just in closing, we were just talking while you all were in the breakout room, modeling, sustaining and doing the modeling practice at like its most promising form is really hard in classrooms. There's so many things that push us toward that information frame or toward that sort of fact-based, knowing about kind of way of teaching science. But for almost all of us, that's how we learned science. And staying in that sense-making frame and creating the conditions where students are developing and using a model for making sense of something in the world and not just for writing it down on a test is hard. And so sometimes it's useful to have just some little catchphrases in our head or some easy reminders. And so that's really what I tried to provide tonight. And so we want to kind of stay in the figuring out frame as much as we can. Not to say information's bad, information's good, but we want the information to be used for sense making. So if we can stay in the figuring out of the sense making frame as much as we can, if you ask yourself, what is the model for, in terms of an explanatory purpose, that will get us a long way toward where we want to be. If we just, the contrast again, if we say a model of, we're just talking about the details or the depiction of the thing, not the sort of sense making or the explanatory purpose that something fits. And then also the idea that it's really this triad of the phenomena, the questions we're asking about that phenomenon that allow us to really figure out what the model is for. and organize our learning activities in that way. So those are 3 ideas that hopefully can help help you in your modeling practice, and keep doing the great work, because it's really exciting to have such a big community of teachers doing such wonderful work. And let's see how it goes. We'll keep on keeping on. So thank you. I want to acknowledge National Science Foundation for our funding. And these are the 2 websites for our curriculum. The Living Earth Biology isn't up yet, really. It will be up later this year. And that's just Earth Integrated Biology. That's the model that most California schools are following. These are both high school courses. The Model-Based Biology has a $23 paywall, but after that, you're in open source material land, so you can do whatever you want with it. And so this isn't a commercial, but that's just where those things are if you're interested. And I thank you very much for coming on a Wednesday night in the middle of your summer.
Well, thank you very much for presenting. A question that was asked is the slideshow that we wrote on going to be stay open, or can we make that available? And
yeah, I think both we can leave it open for a little while right now, and I'll leave that link live, and you all will have access to the PowerPoint that I used tonight. So you'll always be able to get to it from there. Well, always, as long as Google's right.
Okay, and we do have some built-in time. If anyone has any questions, if your microphone's not working, I'm going to be monitoring the chat, but otherwise, I think, Cindy, can you manage if people raise their hand?
Now that I'm not screen sharing, I can see the people. If you use the raise hand function, and I can see the chat.
Question earlier on the observation protocol that was used. Someone asked.
Oh, yeah. So we developed our own, and it was a little bit of wacky development, which is why each construct had a different score. We'll probably statistically norm that at some point if we ever decide to collapse those scores. But yeah, it was a homegrown one, and there were many constraints. For example, we could not go into classes in person because of COVID. So we had teachers had a Zoom call on their phone hanging around their necks, and so we could see what they saw and we could hear them. And so our protocol had to only be on teacher talk. We couldn't monitor what the kids were doing or anything like that. So anyway, there were a lot of constraints, but so it was fairly simplistic. But the RTOP someone had in the chat was, we based it on a lot of previously published observation protocols. There isn't really one that's specifically for modeling that I know of anyway. Maybe if someone knows one, they should send it to me. But so that was also part of, we were trying to capture a range of practice all the way from very traditional to high-end modeling. So Melissa.
So one of the buzzwords I've heard I'm in Arizona, and we have, our own set of science centers that are very, very close to the NGSS. But one of the buzzwords that we hear all the time here is phenomena-based instruction, which as a modeler bothers me a lot. And I noticed that in your cycle, you had phenomena question model. You have any tips, ideas for pushing back at that phenomena-based, since now you have some evidence to show that model-based is very effective?
Yeah, that's tough. Obviously I've heard that as well. I think, I wish I had a good answer for that question. It's also, sometimes explanations just get chunked in instead of models. This is a similar challenge, I think, which is to sort of say, well, if you're explaining something, you're using some set of ideas to explain that thing. So we need to make that set of ideas explicit. And that's really the thing we're working on. And but yeah, do I have any quick catchphrases to combat the phenomena thing? I don't think I do. Anybody else have any thoughts?
I have not really encountered that per se, but it sounds like it could be compatible with what we're doing.
Yes, I agree with that.
If you can put select your phenomena to be good representative phenomena of something you really want the students to dig into and understand. But I think it goes back to, yeah, you can start with a phenomena, but what are you going to do with it? That's always the question. Are you working to build a model to answer some questions within that phenomena? Or is it kind of an open-ended inquiry that somehow we will find something to learn here? Anyway,
yeah, I mean, I think that to me,
complication.
the challenge is if you're going out and you're selecting phenomena for your classroom without regard to the model that you eventually want to, develop together, you don't have to have it perfectly worked out, right? Because that's part of what the students are going to do. But if you haven't worked out that PQM for yourself, and you just that my example of the sunset, it's like, well, what question are we asking about the sunset? We could be asking so many different things. And most phenomena in the world are like that, right? If they're really from the natural world, there are a bunch of things going on. And so I think, to me, that's the biggest pushback to saying, like, phenomena are awesome, but they don't do everything all by themselves. What we have to, if we have a set of explanatory ideas that we want kids to learn, or we have a set of science ideas that we're trying to hit some standards here or whatever, we got to kind of select those things carefully. So that's, to me, the challenge or danger of the phenomena. It's not I agree, it's not inconsistent. It's not by definition inconsistent. It could be perfectly fine, but I think sometimes teachers, especially teachers, I don't want to disparage anyone, but a teacher who's maybe unsure of a content area that they're in or something like that might not know all of the complexity of a particular phenomenon, and then it's like things kind of go off the rails and get really messy because that phenomenon maybe wasn't that great for the thing that they really wanted to teach. Other questions? Oh, Lee.
I was just wondering, Melissa, you mentioned that, and I kind of thought the same thing that other people were saying. So it sounds though like that is somebody's new terminology that is really different than modeling. So even though what we're doing really is phenomenon based, is that correct? There's some other thing that really doesn't look at. Anyway.
Yeah, I think when I've heard it anyway, I've heard it as sort of like a way to collect the practices, the NGSS practices. And it's like, but that doesn't come for free just because you have a phenomenon in the room now. It's a simple, something we often hear in our region anyway, I don't know if you've heard this, Lee, is activity before content. It's like if you just move the activity to the beginning of your unit, now you've solved all your problems. And it's like, well, it's a good start, but there's, a little bit more to it than that. So that's the way I've heard it, is sort of maybe what Melissa's thinking, is like just this sort of simplistic thing, like have a phenomenon, start with a phenomenon, and, do an anchor. And it's like, okay, yes. And there's more. I would definitely like to see that modeling implementation rubric too. I'm trying to see if there's anything else.
Ray had a really good question. He should ask it.
Oh, the representations one?
Yeah, sorry, Cindy.
Yeah, no, that's great. So like I said, I think I said this early in my work, I was like line in the sand. If you call this thing a model, you're wrong. It's not. The model is the idea that lets you build the thing. I'm not so, this is what happens when you get older. There's a lot of contingencies that come into your mind. So I think the representation thing is still problematic, though, in the modeling practice, the way many teachers and folks, curriculum designers, interpret it from NGSS. And so the reason, and this is also related to another question in the chat about the conceptual piece, is that if we keep the ideas as the thing that animates the model, or that makes the model, then there are lots of different ways to show people what's in your head. It could be, I write it out in prose. And in fact, in our curriculum, almost all the models that we do in biology, we end up with what we call model statements. Very few of them are three-dimensional, and even fewer of them are diagrammatic, and none of them are, an equation or something like that. So it's like, not to say those things aren't models, they could be, but if we keep the idea of model as the thing, that the idea that we have about how something works, and the word that is also often very useful in my experience is mechanism. If we think about what is the mechanism for this that helps us explain why this thing happens, or how this thing looks, or what this thing does, that I think pulls it back into the modeling range. So the representations, the whole of for thing was really born of this thing that we saw so often in schools, which was like, I want my kids to learn the model of blah, 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 and this is what I mean. And now all they're doing is memorizing the words evaporation, condensation, precipitation, and where to put them on this little cycle diagram. And they don't have any idea that, like, oh, condensation and rain in my life, it's just, so I'll stop now.
So Jeff has his hand up.
Jeff.
Sorry about that. Lost my
No problem.
thing for a moment. So I was wondering, is there a paper published on this with the talks about your protocol and the results?
So we are just working on it right now. We literally just crunched all the numbers and scored all the stuff like 2 weeks ago to present at this meeting. So there's a poster sitting on my hotel room bed right over there that we'll be sharing at this meeting, and then we'll be writing it up as soon as we can. I'll make sure the AMTA folks get it when it's.
What meeting are you currently at?
I am at the National Science Foundation PI meeting for people who have the grant category DRK12. So yeah, we're sharing our first run of results right now. There's a lot, like, for example, we had 26 treatment. Well, we had 41 teachers in the study overall, and each of them had between 2 and 5 class periods of students. So the student assessments, and they were open-ended questions for response. So we just got there were 7,000 of those to score, and each one needed more than one scorer. And so anyway, it's been a thing, but we're trying to get results out soon. So my curriculum development work mostly has been in biology, although my early days, we were just talking while you were in the chat, my closest collaborator was a physicist at UC Davis named Wendell Potter. So we did a bunch of work in that arena. So the professional development work that I do in the Sacramento region is all comers, K-12, all disciplines, but our curriculum development work that's been funded by the National Science Foundation has been in biology, and then now this Earth integrated biology. We are hoping someday to do some other disciplines, but this has taken 12 years to get done. So I don't know if I have enough years left in my career to do another one. So that's for you all to do.
That's right. It's crowdsourcing, right?
Yeah. But one of the reasons we chose biology was because of something, Larry, you said earlier, which is that, all of the early work was in physics. And so a lot of people would say, you can't model in biology. We're like, oh, yes, you can. You can model in any discipline. And so we decided that's why we tackled that one. And I think NSF funded us for that for 2 reasons. One is there was much less modeling work done there. And it's as you know, most of the, not everywhere, some physics first schools, but most students in America take biology in high school. So it's highest impact factor.
Just 6 degrees of separation comment. Wendell Potter hosted 2 modeling workshops at UC Davis in the late 90s.
And then I was at one, I was at that.
So I came to Davis in 2002.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and his work was well underway, and sort of like what we were just talking about, like the similarity in some of the ways that we talk about modeling between the work that I do and the work that you do. That was how, like, Wendell and I were just like, the second we met and we started talking, it was like, oh my gosh, and then there was so he was such an amazing collaborator. I miss him so much. You
guys did energy work, models of energy in biology. I think I remember seeing posters about that at some point.
That he did that?
Yes.
Yeah, we did some work around that. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, David. And in fact, I think history has like even more overlap sometimes than math with us, like in terms of what we're trying to do. It's like take the evidence, build an understanding of what happened. I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Sharon.
So I've been teaching 11th grade and they've been taking this CAST test every year, and it's supposedly biology. So what you're doing could be really helpful for that. And then also to let you know, the feedback I got from the students was a lot of it was science concepts, basically. So we had gone over independent and dependent variables. Having gotten that feedback first year, and then this year the kids said, yeah, that was helpful. So just so you know.
Cindy, do you, in case anyone has a question later, like, is there a way that they could send that question to you, maybe through an email?
Yeah, my email, I put my email at the end of the presentation, so you'll be able to get it there. And I'm happy to share it here too. I am not a great email correspondent though. So if I don't respond, please just go ahead and email me again. That's really the best way. And I won't be mad or feel, harried or anything. It's just, I get a lot of email and.
Well, you're kind of busy too.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm on top of it, but this is the kind of email that's so much more fun to attend to than like the department meeting stuff. You know how that is.
I think that we have one last question before, and everyone please stick around for a few minutes after we have this question answered, because I have some information to give you. But the question was, what are examples of attending to student ideas beyond eliciting?
So are you talking about in our protocol? I mean, I think attending to student ideas is like, I elicit a student idea, what is this thing called? Or what do you think about this thing? And a kid says something, and it's like, then what do we do? Do we ask another student to comment on it? Or build on it? Do we rephrase it and send it back? Do we create a question out of that? Do we do something with it? And on our protocol, to get the very most points, the question we were asking was, did a student idea change the intellectual direction of the class today? Which we found very rarely. But you could get a tiny bit of credit if like a teacher said something like, so I hear so-and-so say that, who else has that idea? Or what do you think? And okay, so that makes me think we should spend a little bit more time on what we're doing right now. Maybe it didn't like shift us to say like, oh, we need a new model idea, or we're gonna, revise our model based on this new idea that someone said, but maybe we just lengthened or maybe shortened, like, oh, we're ready to move on. Like, at least that's attending a little bit. It had to go something beyond thanks, yes, that's correct, or something like that. So like doing something in the room with the idea was an example of attending. We didn't see a lot of it because, people are in a rush too. It's hard to fit it all in time.